What we're going to do, we're going to process these plants. If you're going to process the plantain, I like to tear it up. You know, kind of like when you're cooking with herbs, they say crush them or to get the flavor out, whatever. Same thing here. We want these crushed up. You want it as small as possible. If you come back and say, Tom, is this small enough? I'll give you this answer I usually give. That's good, but smaller is better. Something, you can use a knife, but something doesn't feel right about doing this with a knife to me. I don't know. The jewel weed's a little different. I'll take the leaves off the jewel weed, so I just get the stem, and then I will get a knife and cut these as thin as I can vertically, and we'll put them in. With the yarrow, the way I do this, I bruise the leaves, so I kind of fold it up in my hand, and I take it and I just squeeze them, and they'll change to a darker green color, and I'll bruise them. Then I'll pull just the leaves off and put them in the pot. So we want to get about a third, a third, a third. We're going to put them in the pot. Then we're going to put 1 cup of olive oil in the pot. We'll see if we need to add more herbs or more oil, because we want the oil just to cover the herbs. At that point, we're going to fire up the stove, put it on the stove. I'm going to have to modify that. And here's the thermometer. We want to get it to 120 degrees. Now, if you're doing this in the woods and didn't have a thermometer, you can use your finger. Very hot bath water is 110 degrees. So if you put your finger in there, it's not going to give you a burn, but at 120 degrees, if you test it a few times, you'll know. You can leave your finger in maybe about 2 seconds and want to pull it out. So you can guess that temperature with your finger, but we have a thermometer. You want to keep it right around 120. If it gets up to 125, that's okay. Take it off. 130 is okay. 140 is getting a little warm. You go much above 150, you're affecting the effectiveness of some of these plants. So we want to keep it right at 120, 125 for 30 minutes. If you want to go overboard, you can leave it 45 minutes to get a little more out of the plants. There's no sense in leaving it over an hour. You're not going to get anything more out of it. At that point, we're going to strain it and just keep the liquid olive oil that's been infused with all these plants. In another pot, we're going to take 3/4 of this beeswax. This is pure beeswax, and I should tell you, there's really 3 kinds of beeswaxes you can get. It's all made from bees, but this is the white beeswax. You can get yellow beeswax and a dark brownish yellow beeswax. You can use any of them for salves. The difference is the beekeeper, the very first year the bees draw the comb out, the beekeeper takes the honey out and he destroys the comb right away. And he melts it and you get this white beeswax. A beekeeper doesn't want to do that. His money comes from selling honey, not selling beeswax. So if you extract honey and you put the empty comb in your hive, the bees only will take a couple weeks sometimes to refill it, and you get a whole new crop of honey, and you're going to make a lot more money off that. So they want to keep the comb intact. So this white is a little more expensive. The yellow stuff has been about 3 years old, and he melted it down. At 5 or 6 years old of that beeswax, he has to replace it anyway because it's getting old and cruddy. So he just busts it out and melts that down and gives you blocks, and that's the real dark colored beeswax. That's the cheapest because he's got to tear it out anyway. Most people like the white beeswax for salves just because it looks cleaner, but you can use any of them for the salves. The price difference isn't that much. Like this is $2 for an ounce. The yellow stuff is $1.50, and the old stuff is $1. So we're not talking a lot of money. But so we're going to take 3/4 of this ounce. If we were making, say, chapstick, you would make a very similar way for the summertime. I would tell you to use this whole thing of beeswax because it's going to make your chapstick stiffer, and you're going to be having this chapstick in your car. It's going to be hot, summertime. You're going to want it more solid. If you were saying, I want to make chapstick, I'm going skiing in the wintertime, you're going to go up to Vail, I would say only use a half an ounce because you want that chapstick softer, because in the cold weather, you want to still be able to put it on your lips. So you can adjust the amount. This is going to be a first aid salve. I'm sure if you have a cut, you don't want to press real hard to put it in, but you don't want it to be runny either, so we're going to use about 3/4. We're going to slice this up nice and thin. So we have our oil here. It's going to still be around 120 degrees. We're going to cut up the beeswax. We're going to melt it down. Beeswax melts at about 135 degrees. Once it's all melted, we're going to mix the two together. And the beeswax, since this is 120, it'll solidify a little bit. We'll put this on the heat, stir it up just until the wax melts. Then you guys can decide if you want to put one more additive in, vitamin E oil. Vitamin E oil, you know, helps healing, but people don't know that it's a preservative. So people always ask, well, how long is this first aid salve going to last? If you don't put vitamin E oil in, about 6 months, unrefrigerated. You put the vitamin E oil in, it'll last 1.5 years to 2 years.
Out of the refrigerator?
Out of the refrigerator in your medicine cabinet. And by last, it will last longer, but it won't be quite as effective after 2 years. But these plants will be around next year at this time, so like Glenn was mentioning, you just do it every year. Same thing with the herbs that I collect and dry. They say they last 1 year. Well, I found they're still effective after 2 years. I notice a difference after 3, and if they're older than 3 years, throw them out.
That's why you make a tincture too, right?
Mhm.
Just
And tinctures will last indefinitely.
Yeah.
Indefinitely. So the first thing we have to do is get some cutting boards. We're going to tear this up. We're going to tear the leaves off this and slice this thin. We're going to bruise this and then tear the leaves off and put it in here, roughly a third.
Okay.
After we get it all in, add the oil, then we'll heat it up and go from there.